Hey all, it's Starzy and today we are here to do my June wrap-up. I've been trying to ease myself back into being actively online post-COVID, so I'm pretty sure this is the first time you've seen me since my last wrap-up, but not too much to update on other than, recovering, being busy with work, been consuming a bunch of media, and I did finally get to have my birthday celebrations. Oh, I also went to a convention. I went to the first convention that I've been to since before we started going into lockdowns. So my sibling and I did a matching cosplay and that was a lot of fun. It was great to actually be out and about again. I did also get into a video game that for years I insisted I did not like and did not play, and yet here we are, me having played it quite a lot over the past week and a half, and that is Fortnite. I've actually been having a lot of fun playing that with people, especially because there's all these like random custom map things and stuff. Past Starzy would be so ashamed, but I have been having fun with that, so. But yeah, that's what's been happening. Now let's just get right on into the books that I read in June. The first thing that I finished in June is actually probably my biggest disappointment of the year. And that is The Blood Traitor by Lynette Noni, the third and final book in the Prison Healer trilogy. Prison Healer has been like my favorite YA series of recent years. I loved the first book. The second book was a lot slower, but I still really enjoyed it, although the very end made me mad. But this book, I just did not enjoy reading this book, and a big part of that comes down to the characters, because one of the reasons I've loved this series so much is the characters, and particularly the character relationships, and the way a lot of these were handled in this book was really annoying me. I just did not enjoy the reading experience. I did not enjoy the reading experience. The characters were frustrating me, and how some of their dynamics made sense after past events, but also I just was not enjoying reading it, and I did not like how it was resolved, and this book felt very different from where the series started and not necessarily in a way I was enjoying. This book feels so different from where the series started. Like, it feels like a completely different book, and I do think that that happens a lot in these type of series that start on a much smaller scale and then a much bigger by the end, because in the first book, in The Prison Healer, you have a character trapped in a prison, so you're in a singular location the entire book and you have a very small cast of characters, whereas by this third book everything is scaled up. We went to many different locations and some of it felt like it was going too quickly. We had more and more characters, and so it felt like a very different experience, and then that paired with I didn't love everything that was going on and the characters were getting on my nerves, so I did not enjoy this reading experience, and I'm so upset by it because this was like my favorite YA series of the past few years. Saw a bunch of stuff coming, and I can't go into specifics without getting spoilery since the last book in a trilogy, but I did not enjoy the experience. The one saving grace was one friendship that was still going strong and that I enjoyed their dynamic, but otherwise I did not enjoy this experience, and I'm very, very disappointed. I then read Batman and Philosophy, The Dark Night of the Soul, which is another one of these pop culture philosophy books. I talked about the Dungeons and Dragons one last month. I enjoyed this, gave this one 3 stars again though. They don't delve real deep into the concept they're looking at necessarily, and again, there were some in here that I didn't necessarily agree with their viewpoints, especially because there was a lot of discussion of morality and Batman versus Joker, and yeah, some of the things they were arguing, I was like, no. But this was still a really interesting read, and if you have any interest in kind of exploring philosophical concepts in the context of specific pop culture properties in a way that is very much surface level and accessible, I do recommend these. There are a bunch of them for a whole bunch of different things. I also read a good chunk of the Game of Thrones one this month, I think, as well. So yeah, they don't necessarily delve quite as deep as I'd like sometimes, but I do find them quite interesting reads still. I also read Daughter of Redwinter by Ed McDonald. I read an arc of this through NetGalley. I was immediately drawn to it because of the cover. and I need to read more adult fantasy because I do find majority of the times I read adult fantasy, I really enjoy it. I need to read more. I did enjoy this. There were a few hang-ups I had. The relationship our character started in was very much uncomfortable and a grooming situation where she was very young when these two characters met, considering I think she's like 17, a 17-year-old girl in this book, and she was much younger when this guy took her away. So very uncomfortable and wasn't necessarily questioned as much as I'd like. But it's a kind of thing of like, the way teenage girls are written in adult fantasy and the situations they're put in are often really uncomfortable, and especially so I'm finding this trend of like male writers writing teenage girls as their protagonists sometimes. It's a bit odd. It is a bit odd, but this was an interesting story and I did like some of the characters. Our main character has like death magic, which he has to keep hidden because it's something that people can get killed for because it's not really accepted. And also at the beginning of this book, something happens which completely upturns her world and she has to go somewhere else. I was also pleasantly surprised that she's kind of questioning her sexuality in this book as well, which I expect may be explored further in future books. But yeah, I enjoy getting to know these characters and seeing how the plot unfolded. There were kind of political things between families and betrayal and like mystery of like who is involved. So I did quite enjoy this and I'm definitely interested to continue with the series. I then read I Kissed Shara by Casey McQuiston, which isn't something that I necessarily usually gravitate towards because it is that kind of YA contemporary. But I did overall enjoy this experience of listening to this, but I definitely had problems with it. First of all, I feel like parts of this book were playing it off as like a sweet romance, and as much as seeing sapphic romances are great, it wasn't a sweet romance, it was very much an unhealthy obsession. Also just the extents these people went to, because the whole plot of this is like Shara Wheeler goes missing after kissing a few people, and then they're all following a bunch of clues that she's left to try and work out where she's gone and what's going on. And the extents they went to find all these clues were a bit much, and I feel like at some point, even if I was curious, at some point I would have just given up. Like, you are not worth it, ma'am. You are not worth it. I don't know, it was interesting and engaging. It was just that, like, all of these characters are unlikable, and our main character was awful. Not a great person, particularly a pretty bad friend, weird obsessions going on. So I have very mixed feelings and I didn't rate this because very unhealthy stuff going on, but it was kind of interesting. And as much as I don't think you have to like characters in a book to enjoy it, this book did feel like it was it did feel like you were meant to like the characters at the end and you were meant to be rooting for them, and I just was not. I was not, and also there are kind of two different sections to this book in that they feel very different, and once we kind of moved away from the more mystery element, I wasn't necessarily loving it as much. But I also read The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I read the entirety of this on Ali's 24-hour stream because I was on there for like 7 hours, which was not planning to be there for that long, but it meant I read this entire book on that stream, and so I have that connection now where I probably enjoyed this book all the more because I was reading it in that environment of hanging out with other readers. A very popular romance, we've got office rivalries to lovers situation going on, and there was a lot of tension, and I also just enjoyed their dynamic, and there were a couple of small things that I didn't love about this book, but for the most part they were resolved very quickly, so I think I did still give this 5 stars. I really enjoyed this, and the environment I read it in probably contributed to that as well, but I kind of loved this book. I have definitely become a bit of a romance girly in the past few years. I also read The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho. This was one of my 12 recommendations in 12 months things. This involved like a nun, I think she was. She was some kind of religious girl who ended up joining like a bunch of bandits. I can't even entirely remember what was going on in this story, I'll be honest. It was fine. It was fine. Didn't love it, didn't hate it. It was fine. I wouldn't ever revisit it. Wasn't necessarily entirely for me, but I read it. I then listened to Wretched Waterpark by Kirsten White, which I listened to an ALC of this because I am now part of Libro.fm's Educator LAC program, so I get access to a few free audiobooks, and so I am very grateful for that because I really enjoyed this. It's a spooky middle grade, which is exactly my kind of thing, and it's probably my favorite thing that I've read from Kiersten White because I've had a bit of a mixed experience with her books in the past. But this involves a group of siblings who get dropped off by their parents with like a weird aunt to stay with over the summer, and the aunt then ends up saying, oh, you can spend the week at this water park, and some weird stuff's going on and people seem to be going missing. This was a good time. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the vibes of this. There are going to be more in this series, so I'm interested to keep reading and to try and find out exactly what is going on with this family. I really enjoyed this, and it also makes me a little more interested to read Kiersten White's adult horror she's just come out with, Hide. I know that hasn't been getting necessarily the greatest reception all round, but because I enjoyed this so much and it had the spooky vibes, I'm intrigued. I am intrigued. And then the last thing I read in the month was another arc that was Book Lovers by Emily Henry, which had a weird situation, particularly where I was approved for this after the archive date, but then just recently, many weeks later, it opened back up to download, which I'm very happy for because now I don't have a book there that I can't access affecting my ratio. But I don't know, strange things happen sometimes over there. Strange things happen, but I did really enjoy this book. It was another romance I really enjoyed. We've got two people who work in the literary field here. We have an agent and an editor, and they're actually two people who years ago had perhaps a not great run-in together, a bit of an antagonistic meeting where they never spoke again for years. But our female protagonist has gone on a small town trip with her sister, gone on this little getaway, and she happens to run into this editor there, and she goes down from there. I enjoyed their dynamics. I enjoyed the fact that they kind of formed this friendship first, even though there was that underlying tension. And I also really enjoyed that there wasn't some kind of big conflict between these characters based on like miscommunication or anything, which happens so much in romance and always annoys me. But our conflict in this was more situational than conflict of characters. So I also enjoyed that about it. And my one complaint with this was how unprofessional they were from the very beginning. Like, they had a very professional meeting, but then were sending like these weird emails to each other, and then they never spoke again for years. But even those initial emails and then their initial contact when they meet back up again, it was very strange to me that you would be talking to someone immediately like that, especially someone you know in a professional context. But once we got over that and they'd started to get to know each other more, where that would be kind of more normal, I enjoyed it a lot from there. It was just that initial thing that held me up a bit of like, this is weird, this is a professional contact, but okay. I think I might have even given this 5 stars as well, because I just really enjoyed it. I just really enjoyed it. It was a good time. So, also interesting that this book kind of plays with classic romance tropes in a number of ways. It's the first book I'd read by Emily Henry, so if you have any recommendations for which of her books I should potentially pick up next, let me know. But yeah, that's everything I finished in June, I believe. I started with a huge disappointment, but I did read some things I really loved, so it wasn't bad overall. Obviously, I've been gaming a lot still. That's still kind of my primary hobby, as much as I somehow still managed to read a bunch in there. I've been playing Fortnite, obviously still playing DBD, and I've also been playing The Quarry, which I'm not loving. Admittedly, I'm not loving, but I am streaming it, so my enjoyment is upped by the fact I'm hanging out with other people at the same time. But I don't know, it feels very slow at the moment, and not much has happened despite the fact I'm over halfway in. I am playing that. It's a horror story game. Yeah, I binged the recent season of Umbrella Academy last night. I stayed up much too late doing that, but I was so invested. I wanted to know what was going on in the last few episodes, so that happened. I was clearly quite engaged in that, and it was also really sweet how certain things were handled in this series as well. although some characters were also annoying me. And I finally watched Multiverse of Madness, because I couldn't see it in cinemas because I was in isolation around that time. I'm not sure how I feel. I haven't entirely decided how I feel about that movie. I feel like I need to rewatch it because I didn't love it, I didn't hate it. At the moment I kind of feel, I don't know, I'm just kind of sitting in the middle. And I expected to kind of love this given some of the stuff that was going on, and especially now loving Wonder a lot more in the MCU. Undecided how I feel. I've watched a bunch of other stuff as well throughout the month because, you know, we pick up stuff here and there, including like, we watched that new Chris Hemsworth movie on Netflix, which was very strange, didn't love that. But there's some of the kind of highlights of my media from June. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or if there are any of these books you are interested in picking up, or let me know what was your favorite media that you consumed in June. And otherwise, I think that's going to be it from me today. So, TTFN and Starzyrts.